Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much once again for joining us on Zoom. For the last session of ELT Summit 2020, we have Eric Roth. I'm going to say for this last expert session, we have with us my friend, Eric Roth. He he is associated with University of Southern California, USA, and he has taught non-fiction writing courses in Spain, France, and Vietnam. He is the author of Compelling Conversation, a prestigious series of ESL and IFL textbook that features thematic chapters to create quality conversations. Eric's fluency-focused books use conversation starters, interview questions, classic quotations, paraphrasing exercises, and traditional proverbs to help learners empower their English language. Eric has developed a unique set of pattern to help our learners improve their spoken English. And a special thing about Eric, like he is highly supportive. He has supported me in almost 2 or 3 of my online adventures. He calls it adventures. And I'm sure we are going to get a lot of benefits from his today's session. Eric is going to talk on creating compelling conversations in online classes, deploying search and share exercises on Zoom. Welcome, Eric, once again, and it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you for that excessively generous introduction. So, we've been talking for the last 2 days about the bizarre situation we found ourselves in. We were kind of not born into, but thrown into the COVID era. And as a result, we had to modify a lot of our classes. What I thought I would do today is share some of my experiences this semester, how I adapted some materials, and how I tried to deepen some of the exercises. I also eliminated many assignments because in my awkwardness, in my uncomfortableness in the beginning, I underestimated the length and the intensity of the COVID crisis. So let me go ahead and share. We're going to go over a PowerPoint, and Mr. Terrell has assured me that he'll be. Tarun has assured me he'll be able to send you a 19-page handout that are all reproducible, so you can kind of use or lose, and I hope you find value in some of these exercises. And you'll have a list of 2 pages of curated podcasts that form the kind of the backbone of one of my speaking skills classes. So students are able to choose a podcast to review and evaluate each week and then come back and share. We used to do it in class and in person. It was easy and comfortable, and then we went online, and it changed. But eventually, it also became comfortable and kind of reassuring, and the continuity from the in-class experience to the online experience was something I wanted to spend a lot of time on. So let me share my screen. Let me pull this up, and I am I'm less of a expert on this than I would like. Let me minimize my screen here for a second. Okay, so, okay. So the search and share exercises are basically a communicative approach that we've used in many other situations. And I don't think you can see my screen yet. Let me.
Not yet.
Okay. This is always the frustrating part of doing 2 things at once. I will do it the slow and ugly way. All right, we'll just do the slow and ugly way. Um, all right, thank you for your patience there. And are you able to see the screen now?
Yes, Eric.
Great. So just as a very quick, I call this deploying search and shares because I do think that it's kind of a strategy. It's not the only strategy. It is one of many, many effective strategies. It happens to be one I'm comfortable with and familiar with, and I hope to show you why. So first, a little bit of background. The COVID really hit Los Angeles kind of hard. There's a great deal of uncertainty, and we were unsure of how to handle it. At USC, we've always had contingency plans, mostly thinking in terms of earthquakes. This is Los Angeles, and we kind of have the myth of solid ground, but it's not solid ground. Earthquakes are a living reality. And sometimes we've had, like 30 years ago or so, we had very well publicized social unrest, if you will, riots. And so the university has always been aware that there may come situations, like in 1992, where the university had to shut down. So they've asked everyone to have contingency plans. The contingency plans are emergency lessons that we would use 2 times. And surely we'd be able to get back. They do assume that students have internet connection and access. I guess the context I'd like to emphasize also is that many of our international students had some particular problems. USC, on a very rather sudden notice, asked people to leave their dorms. Now, my classes are mostly graduate students. Many people are living with their family. Many people were off campus, so they were less affected. But there were many people who suddenly found themselves being asked, would you like to move? Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, wouldn't you like to move? And USC was not as harsh as Harvard or as sudden as Georgetown, but it was rather dramatic. And so an ongoing conversation with students was, should I stay? Should I go? How do I stay? And on the mechanics of that. So there was a certain group therapy aspect for the first 2 weeks. We had a contingency plan that we started the week before spring break. Then we had spring break, and then over spring break, they announced that, yes, we'll continue this for 1 more week. And so my initial thought was, well, we'll just keep the original schedule and we'll kind of tweak it a little bit and we'll slow down. And so I'll use the contingency plans. But in those first couple of classes, there was far more silence and far less laughter than in usual classes. And so I very quickly made a couple of adjustments. One was that I would focus a little bit more on positive psychology, which is not, the world is a wonderful place and everything is nirvana and perfect. No such thing. It's that, what is the context that we're in and what are the possibilities that we have for maximizing within that set context. Second one, the university made it very clear very quickly that they were not going to worry about grades. And my courses are credit, non-credit anyway. So that gave us a little bit of freedom to do less and certainly grade less. And I think that was worked out this time. And then finally, because I was so uncomfortable with some of the early class discussions. The class discussion did not work well for me. And the shift, I very quickly embraced the chat box and then the breakout sessions as kind of essential because it wasn't really working. So I added a bi-weekly student conference, a student professor conference with all the students. Now, this is a luxury. My classes are relatively small. And so even if I had 20, 30-minute conferences with everyone, I was still not, working more than 40 hours a week on that. So that was a real fortunate thing of having small classes. I also made the decision after a little bit of research and talking with friends and colleagues and kind of reviewing my own materials that we were going to go to micro lessons. And so for the search and share technique are really micro lessons that we can use. And then I decided that more than usual, I would make a point of praising in general, and then really zooming in and criticizing in particular and in private only. And I decided that the crucial focus would be on asking clarifying questions, developing research skills, and I wanted to remind them as often as possible that they were developing experts as graduate students, that they had expertise, even if they couldn't go to the lab, even if they were trapped in their small apartment.
You were talking about somebody who would like to share.
Sure.
I'm sorry, Eric. I'm sorry.
So what was the question?
No. I'm sorry. Please go on.
Okay. So many of you are coming from the linguistics and English language study. Many of my students come from engineering also, and I think we want to celebrate the story of science and technology. And one way to do that is to explicitly link classroom techniques with styles and ideas from the sciences. So I use the Feynman technique of learning. Many of the students are also international teaching assistants, and they're sympathetic to this. It's a flexible technique. Many people are already familiar with it. The basic technique is pick a topic that you want to learn more about, teach it to someone to the degree that you have the knowledge in clear language. Through that discussion and through their questions, recognize gaps in your knowledge, and then go ahead and fill in those gaps. And then finally, organize the information and keep it simplify as much as possible, but not anymore. Don't distort the information. So the translation for the search and share techniques in the breakout sessions is exactly that. I identify a theme. The students get to pick and study a particular source, and they're kind of co-creating the course. I'm comfortable surrendering a certain level of authority to the students, and I think it makes it more interesting. I'll explain, I'll show that later. Students get to teach their classmates in clear language and small group discussions, either partner conversations or small group, 3, 4, 5 students. And then through the discussions, when they introduce one source and analyze that source, hopefully they recognize what other sources they need to do and what other additional language they need to develop. And then usually we have an extension exercise, which simply means putting something on the learning management system. At USC, we use Blackboard. I've been at USC for 16 years, and in that entire 16 years, we've had many people saying, why don't you use Canvas? Why don't you use, but we're sticking with Blackboard for whatever reason. So that's the Feynman technique, it's flexible, it's effective, and I think it's a friendly, accessible style, I hope. So, I think I've shared this before, my thoughts of, would you rather have that sage on a stage and one message and one source, and it doesn't matter what the topic is, writing resumes or job interview advice or avoiding plagiarism or more effective paraphrasing. It's one source. You can only cover so much material in an 80-minute class session. The wonderful thing, as many speakers have identified in the last 2 days, is that of the online learning environment is we can put out so much material. We can really flip the classroom and list 3, 4, 5, 7 different resources. Most students are not going to look at 7 resources. Some will. Most are going to ignore it. But in the class, we can ask them to participate and to be exposed to many more interpretations and resources. And everyone becomes more responsible for the information they introduce. So from my point of view, asking students to bring in materials and work in small groups in the breakout rooms is more meaningful, it's more democratic, it's more interesting, and often it allows students to be much more self-directed. And you can do small groups you can do partners, you can do small groups of 4 or 5, you can have them come back. If you had 2 students work together and they both introduced a source on avoiding plagiarism, for instance, they take 2-3 minutes, analyze the source, share the information, answer a few questions. Then if they're joined by 2 more students, you can have the student introduce not their material again, although that often works in the retelling, but you can have a student, oh, my classmate Sarah introduced, Let me tell you about what Sarah told me, so that we get a certain accuracy in being able to convey information that we just learned ourselves. And then at the end, is there anything I missed? Is there anything I should have covered that I didn't cover? Fill that in. So it's very flexible. I like the fact that students are the ones who are kind of hunting and gathering the information, that they are summarizing it, they're evaluating it, and summary is kind of telling us the content and scope of the material, maybe the structure too. The evaluation is saying what works, what are the strengths, what are the limits, how does it compare to other sources of information that we've encountered or previous experiences we've had on the topic. I kind of mandate that they ask at least one question, and of course one hopes they ask more than one question to each other. Let me take a step back and talk about my 2 classes. One is the Advanced Speaking Skills class. The official title is for academic and professional purposes. I would add also social. We have very small classes, range from 7 to 20. We have many disciplines. In my last class, I had 3 volunteers out of a class of 11. So that's a decent percentage. And 2 students left Los Angeles. And the significance of that for the online part of the class is we went from meeting in a small classroom on campus, beautiful library room, to now we had to coordinate times with someone from Turkey and someone in China. It does become a little bit more complicated. And their participation, they would often join us for the search and share part. They might present, and then they might not attend all of the other activities. So we relied on their participating on the discussion board and the blogs, the kind of follow-up activities to keep them involved in the class. Okay, you can see on the list are the assignments for the course in general, and we had to make some modifications. One of the standard presentations is a problem solution, and we usually do 3 related search and shares and presentations related. First one on a personal level, one on a problem solution in California or their field, and then a problem solution in their discipline. This time we had to reduce that to 1, and the other modified, dropped assignment. Usually we do informational interviews where you contact a working professional, maybe 5, 6, 7 years more experience than you, and you ask them a series of 10, 12, 15 questions, hoping to expand your professional network, maybe gain a mentor, but certainly gain more information on the practical level of doing the work. You know, what is the job like on Tuesday morning, Thursday afternoon? How do you stay current with the field? What trends are you monitoring? We had to drop that assignment, unfortunately, because of the shift to the online. Because we reduced that assignment, we expanded some of the shorter assignments, and I'll go into those details. I did want to have some continuity, and one of them was a podcast. I gave them a curated list of 2 pages of a recommended podcast. They ranged in length from 3 minutes to 60 minutes. And in our first conference, we went through a variety of different choices of how they might want to approach this. We might start with shorter, simpler ones with transcripts. And then at the end, I'm hoping that they can do a longer one. Usually we have mixed levels, and I give a lot of autonomy. If students want to stay on the shorter ones, they can. Sometimes we have people that are more or less misplaced and are perhaps too low level for the course. I try every semester to convince people that they would like perhaps more benefit from a lower level class, and whether it's from face saving or reputation or whatever. I've never been able to convince anyone in 16 years to leave my class. I'm joking a little bit, but I do say if you didn't test well in the early ones, maybe you want to go on. Let's take a look. These are just some of the very simple ones. Academic Minute. Many of you are very familiar with it. It is a wonderful site. NPR hosted, National Public Radio in the United States, but it's also from the what is it called? The Review of Higher Education. I'm having a brain freeze, I apologize. But the Academic Minute it's not really 1 minute, it's 2 to 5 minutes. The host introduces the academic gives the background of their recent research or their paper. Then they explain any jargon and why they were interested in the topic, what were the results, and what's their interpretation of the results. It's wonderful language practice, especially if people are giving academic presentations. The next one, That's What They Say, is also from NPR, very casual. It takes phrases in English and kind of explores, well, why do we say that? What is the difference between fill in and fill out? And why are they usually the same? It's a nice podcast. It's a lot of fun. It's short, it's accessible. It is 2 people going back and forth. One is a linguist and one's an English professor. Many students do the 6-minute English because it has transcripts and they've studied it previously. And there is still a lot of respect for the British accent. And I'm always surprised at how popular 6-minute English is on this. Anyway, they choose. On the podcast, though, for all its 15-week semester, 14 of the 15 weeks, they're using a podcast. They use the same 10 questions every time. I think classroom rituals add a certain level of familiarity and comfort. And what's not listed here is I give basic information means what's the podcast, who's the host, how long is it, when was it first posted, where can we find it? So kind of reiterating the importance of basic core information. And then of course, they go through in the breakout rooms, you can cover all of these areas. Any questions on these? Okay. And then another resource that we use consistently was Youglish. And so it is first introduced in another search and share, another short micro lesson where I asked them to find 5 words that they can use in an upcoming for their next presentation. And then they find them. I asked them to find 5 examples for each of the words. That's 25 clips. It usually takes about 60, 90 minutes at home. It's a good rigorous exercise. Youglish is created by Google. A decade ago, they would say this was simply impossible and we couldn't have something like this. Now we have over 22 million authentic clips on Youglish. It's a powerful resource. It allows you to look for American accents, British accents, Australian accents, and they've promised to include a variety of Indian accents and Nigerian accents, South African in the future. It is, I assume most of you are familiar with it. There is an ideological spin to it. You'll see President Obama there much more than President Trump. I'm comfortable with that, but there's a clear bias. Again, consistent format. This is only used as a class activity one time, and after they learn how to do it, then they can work on their own for each exercise and each presentation. Youglish is a pretty powerful tool. And again, it's a very simple format. In the breakout groups, you can go through and the other person has these questions. You're just kind of going through the material very briefly. All right. We talked about the contingency plan. I never really expected to have to use them. And if we did, I thought it would be an earthquake. The 2 that I had signed, please watch this first and then choose your own. One was flow, because I figured if it was an earthquake or a riot, and I never imagined the COVID crisis, but that something about motivational positive psychology would be useful to people under stress. And certainly the TED Talk on flow, The Secret to Happiness, one of the most popular TED Talks. Another one is, this is the one we use for definitions. What does flow mean? And then secondly, the problem solution. It's a great crunching of numbers on new insights on poverty. And Hans Rowling does a wonderful example there. And it's a great example of a problem solution. Many of the TED Talks are very effective that way. I figured we could just use the TED Talks over and over and over again. One of my colleagues has an entire semester just of TED Talks. And I think it's National Geographic has a whole series of books that are designed around the TED Talks at different levels of English. From my point of view, it's always useful to give students a choice. It also bought me some time of I don't have to worry about what am I going to do for the next 2 weeks because I've got this. I did not expect COVID to last as long as it did. Second, I like to focus on vocabulary, particularly verbs. And I asked question number 7, what are some 5 strong verbs? And then we can talk about that. In the writing class, it's a little bit different. We have a wide range of activities. We were absolutely on schedule. This was a wonderful class when it was on campus. I was extremely pleased. We had gone all the way down to the Illumina exercise. So we were about halfway done with the course and on track. They had chosen their research topic. They were working on their annotated bibliography where they take 5 sources. They write a 1-page summary and evaluation for the 5 sources. And then that research, I know they at least read 5 articles. Might as well write your own paper at that point. Then and I'm familiar, far more familiar with the topic than I would have been otherwise. Again, mostly graduate students, different countries, different fields. That is one of the challenges for a lot of us as English teachers, is that we are working with many smart, dedicated students from a wide range of disciplines. And how do we kind of stay current? So I fall back on being curious and asking a lot of questions and kind of playing, just what do you mean by that? Can you spin that out for me? I'm unfamiliar with this. I let them know if I don't understand. And I don't understand a lot. And I kind of take advantage of that. Okay, so the emergency exercise that, one thing about this class is it met on campus for 3 hours straight. Lethal online, lethal. I loved it in class, but online, obviously, we have to do a lot of small micro lessons, mix it up, and a lot of things that were originally intended as kind of long-term projects or a full class where you introduce the concept, you do a rough writing in class, then you exchange papers, then we expand on it, go back, rewrite it. We had to put all this online. So many things became process assignments. We also dropped one assignment here. Okay, so what were the emergency ones? Well, again, I used search and shares because they're flexible. So one was mother language interference, always a big issue. But I don't want to say, hey, what problems can we anticipate if your best language is Farsi and you don't have articles? Or what are the problems with verb tense if you're coming from Chinese as your best language? So I leave it open to them. So about 80% of the students will choose their own language and go to Wikipedia often. Sometimes they'll go to other places and read about it and share their language. Sometimes people speak 3, 4, 5, 6 languages, and this is a chance for them to kind of show off a little bit, and they like it. These are the questions we use. Question number 3 and number 6. Can you tell me a bit more about this language? Often leads to nice discussions. Is this language an official language? Where? That's always nice. And it gives me a chance to emphasize that English is not an official language in the United States. We don't have an official language. And then number 6, what are 5 words that English borrows from this language? Again, short, simple, easy. The other contingency exercise is going back to Illumina. Illumina is an online magazine from the USC Viterbi School of Engineering. It's written by undergraduates. We've already done it by this point once in the semester, and sure, we can always do more. This time, the second round, shock, shock, the most popular article was the algorithm behind plane ticket prices and how to get the best deal. And then, of course, Leonardo da Vinci, the engineer, is always a popular, not the artist. A couple of themes always emerge. Dates matter. Technologies evolve. Some big ideas fail. But science and engineering make our lives better and more comfortable. And I really want to emphasize the positive spin, especially during this crisis atmosphere. These are the questions. Again, nothing very fancy. It's very simple, but if you're working in groups of 2 and you're sharing the source, you're kind of taking ownership of it. And then in retelling that information from your partner, if you go to a group of 4, that's also very useful. Finally, it's doable. You can always ask people to contribute it to a discussion or a class blog. Asking people to think in terms of audience and highlighting strengths, noting limits, comparing to other sources. These are good best practices, not only for academic assignments, but in daily life. And so I like to, the next group of 3 exercises are all on activities that people use. So we do restaurant reviews and we highlight verbs there. But we also have a lot of adjectives. And it's a great way to expand exercises. expand vocabulary. Second, it's a way for people to be enthusiastic, and nobody is scared of writing about food. The way that in a class with a lot of Chinese students, students from Saudi Arabia, Iran, some other more closed societies, sometimes people are naturally a little cautious. And then, of course, the shift to the online environment really made the large group discussions very difficult on recorded, but it did allow us in the breakout rooms on Zoom to have far more privacy, and that really worked. It's also nice for shy students because the rooms get very noisy with everybody talking. So you do have more privacy, it's easier to hear. And then, of course, I like to encourage them to go ahead and contribute. So let's take a look at a couple. Oh, and often we're moving from first person to third person. A colleague of mine tells me I should have called this collect and reflect because you're collecting information and you're reflecting on what you found. So restaurants, everybody uses Yelp. You've used Yelp, I've used Yelp. It's very accessible. I like to emphasize that if we can combine both fact and opinions and identify the difference between them, that's useful. And that we always have reasons for our opinions. This is the basic format, very comfortable, but they may not know number 5, claim to fame. That's a nice expression that they may be unfamiliar with. And then consumer products on Amazon provides great choices, gives us a chance to pay attention to word forms, the difference between wide and width and widen, and weigh and weight. Numbers add precision. And so, if we're comparing 3 products from Apple, why are we choosing this version, not that version? It allows us to compare and contrast, do comparative and superlatives. These are the 10 simple questions. One thing I didn't, sometimes would add in the discussion of if you were going to buy the next version of this item, what would you like it to include? Why? Movies, popular, and sometimes we'll have 3 Idiots up here, but I haven't seen 3 Idiots yet. But La La Land and Joker, very, very popular. Again, we're teaching how to use quotes, and when they give the illustration, where does it come from? I just use IMDb. So we can start off talking about what's your favorite genre movies, 5 adjectives to describe the movie, allows us to talk about characters, and of course, verb tense. So movie reviews usually are just a search and share activity, fun conversation for a day. Sometimes I had to go on to a classroom presentation. This semester, this was not a standalone assignment, but this was kind of a stepping stone assignment. So this was the first phase, the breakout discussion with search and share, what later became the classroom presentation. They also had a chance to practice their PowerPoints in breakout rooms. All right, let me kind of wrap up. I think that it does help people think a little bit about how to present information and vary it. Let me zoom back. A good friend of mine, Brett Warner, he's a co-author in one of my books, the CC Japan. He has a podcast, the Higher Ed Tech podcast, and he has a exercise that he does regularly with his students, and I just stole it from him. I love it. It's called 3 Before Me. So before you ask me a question, have students write a question, work with another student, perhaps in a breakout room, go to Google with that, find 3 keywords, and then go to YouTube. And often it's very surprising. So I did this with the positive trends because I was trying to be positive in a difficult environment. And so instead of focusing on problems, then I focus on, well, what's a positive trend? And I said, well, our class example together was a positive trend in California. I made a mistake because, of course, the word positive has a lot of different meanings. And during the COVID crisis, positive also people can test positive for COVID. So for the first couple of responses were all COVID. So anyway, I think you get an idea of some of the activities that we've talked about in the range. Stepping stone, you can use this as a reinforcement of material, or you can go on to other assignments. Often this is the breakout groups on Zoom and this discussion for 10, 20 minutes. Repeat if you want more than once. It can be a wonderful building block to longer assignments. And it also allows them to individualize their personal interests and research more. Next semester, I've got to come up with a couple new ones. I'm going to do birthdays and what was the world that we were born into? And what was it like? Perhaps talk to our family if we can, and how did what was going on with the family? Here's some new stories. Maybe share some favorite stories. But also, what music was the world listening to? When I was born, bossa nova music, very popular from Brazil. My mom would emphasize that she's very happy that the West Side Story became a movie released that week. Why was that significant? Well, her first date with my father was seeing West Side Story, the musical, on Broadway. So that was kind of a nice unity there for her. She took that as a very good omen. But I think asking people, what were some popular movies the year you were born? What were some major news stories? What songs were popular? And kind of, how do you celebrate birthdays? Can bring it back to now. And then what do you want to do in the next year? This last year forced many of us to reimagine, reforecast our futures. So in this environment, I think it's more important than ever to fortify the professional identities of students, graduate students, who often were under a lot of stress. And Search and Shares gave them a chance to share their experiences and also share their expertise. And then next year, I will also do one on culture shock, will be my contingency plan. And then one thing we can do on culture shock might be before and after COVID. I think it'll be a nice emergency. It also might be useful because traditionally many students have volunteered this as a topic. The context is a little different. If you're an international student in the United States, and then you are writing about it, and then let's say you choose not to come to the United States, but attend classes from India, China, Malaysia, Argentina, Turkey, wherever. So that's that. I do think there are a lot of benefits. It's a simple technique. It's easily adaptable. You can do it for 10 minutes. You can do it for 120 minutes and just have it rotated over and over and over again. And the breakout rooms make it very easy and provide a lot of privacy. I think students do gain a lot of comfort, and I was very pleased with the feedback from the students on the course evals. Here's some, I want to thank International Society for Educational Leadership. Thank you for listening. And then here's some recommended sites. As I say, Tarun's going to send you a copy of this PowerPoint and also the handout 19 of the exercises from the book, Creating Compelling Conversations. And then there's my contact. So let me stop sharing that and ask if we have any questions. And I apologize I went on so long. So can I answer any questions?
There are two questions in Q&A, Eric.
Sure.
Yeah, one is from Mahima. She is asking, can you please elaborate on how to keep students interested in podcasting tasks, podcasting activities?
Sure. Well, this semester forecasting was really difficult. Many people were going to present at conferences, and conferences were canceled or were thrown online. But in the spring, many conferences were just canceled. So for the many students in graduate school are becoming developing experts. So one of the easy standalone tasks I like is tell us about a significant trend in your field. So when you're doing that, you're kind of fortifying your identity as an expert, because you may use terms and people say, oh, I'm not an economist. Tell me what GDP means, and how is GDP different from GNP? I've heard both terms. They like it because it's a chance to play expert and to share their experience. As far as the reforecasting and in the future, I had a lot of conversations in the conferences about not only should I stay, should I go, should I continue my studies, why continue, will this field exist, will this office work exist? We didn't have a lot of answers. So being comfortable with uncertainty was a real thing. And so then teaching the importance of hedging language for that to describe our experiences and to describe our plans. So instead of saying we will, we'll say likely, seems likely, appears probable. And hedging language is always very, very useful on that. So that's my long answer to a simple, short answer, a simple, short question.
And
Sumitra
Balakrishnan, she wants to learn, what is the effectiveness of search and share exercises in a larger classroom? Like Eric, in India, we would have around 60 to 70 to 90 students in a classroom. So,
right. So I think that is, Zoom, it's a great question. And the breaking up that larger class, obviously you're not going to have the benefit of a lot of personal student professor conferences, unfortunately. But the breakout rooms allow you to take a class of, let's say, 75 students, take them in groups of 5, and you've got a manageable group there for you to work with. And then as the teacher, you're dropping in on the different breakout sessions. So 5 students have to be, they'll need 5 minutes each, maybe to go over their material. So that session would be 25 minutes. Now, when you come back, you might want to have them on the discussion board, perhaps summarize a paragraph for their movie review, a paragraph for their restaurant review, and include the link. So you can use it both a standalone and a share. So I think that it really is very useful for larger classes, and it's a real challenge. Those very, very large classes are extremely difficult to teach. I think that this is another arrow in your quiver. It's another, tool, another technique to be used. Is that helpful?
Yeah, and Monita Mitra, who is teaching an engineering college, perhaps, she wants to find out on how to monitor the format of writing cover letters in an online class.
Great. So I use Google Docs quite a bit. So there are a million different formats to use for cover letters. I teach a 4-paragraph formula, if you will. First, you want to, identify what the position is. You want to write, as always, you want to write from the reader point of view, not the writer point of view. So many of our undergraduate students, their first drafts, if you just ask them to do a cover letter, I, so many I's. It's just, it's awful. So we are writing from our own point of view, but we are writing for the reader. So in that first paragraph, we go over how did you hear about the position? What is the position? Why do you think you're, as a graduate student in electrical engineering, I appear to meet all the qualifications. I'm not the ideal candidate. I don't know the ideal. I know what you publicly said, and I appear to meet all of the requirements. And then, indicate a motive for why this position and how it relates to your future in the field. So I'll recommend something like, this would be an excellent place to start my career as a software engineer in the United States, or for OPT or something. Okay.
Yes. So if anybody has any question, you can post it in Q&A. Or
but by the way, just on the Google Docs is really fantastic.
Definitely.
And now there's a double-edged sword. Now Google Docs allows us to see everything our students write.
True.
I grew up worried about a surveillance state. So there is a side of me that's like, wow, should I be able to see all their notes and everything? But it's such a wonderful, powerful tool as an English teacher that I love Google Docs. There's some Chrome extensions you can do that really make it even more effective.
You're right. That's true. Okay. Any other questions, friends?
Well, thank you very much. I know that you've had 2 days full of information, and I appreciate your patience. And as I say, you'll get a 19-page handout, and they're all use or lose. What I like is that they're flexible. You can use them for intermediate students. You can use them for high intermediate. You can use them for advanced. You can also build on things like when I ask for 5 verbs for eating and cooking, if someone says chop, then I say, okay, can you give me some 3 other words that rhyme with chop? So it's a great way to reinforce their prior knowledge, and they really appreciate that. Right. And again, I do think it's important that we think about how to motivate and support and encourage our students in a difficult time when some of them are going to be wondering, not only why am I studying English, but why am I pursuing this at this time? So I think that we have to be more than just language technicians. We have to be humanistic educators.
That's true. That's true. Thank you very much, Eric, for your enlightening and enriching session. Every participant has something to say about it. Like people are saying, very informative. Somebody is saying, it's an insightful session. Here, I read something, very interesting session. I gained a lot of information. That is what Anuradha Pandit has to say. Dr. Deepika Gardner says, Eric's session takes the cake.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Well, I'm glad to contribute.
Yes, and
I mean,
be
it really
nice.
is it's an amazing miracle of the 21st century that thousands of miles away, 12 time zones apart, we're able to have this conversation and share ideas.
I'm really feeling so lucky to connect you with my friends here. And they are not only from India. We have people from more than 30 countries right now, right?
Fantastic.
Yes, and Dina is Kinsinger from USA says, glad to know about the Yoglish. That's a wonderful resource, and thank you for sharing. That's what she has to say. All right, so Eric, it's unending. we just got 10 more messages. And Dr. ISV Manjula says Google Doc example is great. Yes, it is definitely. It is. Dr. Ratna Parva says it's fabulous. So thank you very much, Eric, for being so supportive and you have been exploring resources like anything, and you never step back and never stop yourself from sharing it. That's something that makes you great. So thank you very much for being what you are.
My pleasure.
Yes.